Hi everyone, thanks for joining today's webinar, Time-Saving Forensic Techniques for Your Next Case. My name is Julia O'Shea and I'm the Product Marketing Manager here at BlackBag. Before we start today, there are a few things I'd like to review. We are recording this webinar and we will share the on-demand version when the webinar is complete. If you have questions, please submit them in the questions window and we will answer them throughout or in our Q&A at the end of the webinar. I'm excited to introduce our speaker today, Ashley Hernandez. Ashley is the Director of Product Development here at BlackBag and has worked in digital forensics for over 15 years. She has taught and certified investigators in digital forensics and security topics, including speaking at many digital forensics and law enforcement conferences. Thanks for joining us today, and Ashley, if you're ready, I will hand the reins over to you to get started.
Thanks, Julie, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Today's topic is going to be covering some techniques to use to make sure that you're approaching your case smartly and you're able to get to the data that you need quickly and easily. We're proud to have released Blacklight 2019 R1 this week, and I'm going to highlight some of the new features that we've added that we think will make your job go more smoothly and you be able to get to the data you need more quickly. So just a little overview of where we're going to go in the next section of time. There are some general techniques that are going to work regardless of your tools. Those are mostly covered in the first parts of this presentation. And then there's going to be some specifics that we're going to talk about, including information about our new image categorization, our ability to export to logical evidence files, and our new index search that we're going to cover how those are specifically designed to speed up your investigations. So we're going to cover 7 different techniques in this presentation. There's going to be a combination of PowerPoint and then some live demo, and we will be taking occasional breaks for you guys to ask questions. So please use the question window if you have any questions. The first topic that we're going to talk about is beginning with the end in mind, making a plan. So it's a highly effective strategy for general productivity, but it's especially important when we're looking at starting an investigation. I pulled this thread from Twitter that also inspired a blog post by Brett Shavers. I've listed the DFIR training link down below if you want to dive more deeply into this discussion. But one of the ways that we set ourselves up for success when we're looking at starting a case and making sure we're using our time and resources wisely is by going ahead and making a plan. So knowing what the objectives are for the case, both from the person who you're accountable to, whether that's maybe an internal HR department if it's a corporate use case, or from the district attorney if you're looking at prosecuting specific types of crimes, knowing what their bar is for evidence and what they want to see will really help you kind of keep the end goals in mind as you're looking through how you want to approach the evidence. Also, taking down some notes about the context of the evidence. This could be everything from information you know about the person who owns the device that you're looking at to information about the device itself, like the operating system. As you can see from this Twitter post from one of the folks who started this discussion, they start with the registry, which is a great place to start on Windows investigations, but not as awesome for a Mac investigation. So we want to make sure that we are understanding the type of device that we're working with and things that might be in play, like encryption or other type of pieces that we might need to get past. And the last point are, what are your time constraints? These could be resource constraints, these could be time and cost constraints. Sometimes they're not actually looking for everything, they just want enough to move to the next step. Or there might be places where they don't want to see anything from unallocated, things that have been carved out because those are too hard for them to move forward with on the investigation. So they might have some parameters that can help limit what you need to do. Another example of this would be time constraints with search warrants or others processes where you're only allowed to look at certain amounts of data. So there were a couple other things on the thread. I recommend you go and check out Twitter for some of this active discussion, as well as Brett's post. But just going about finding how you want to start is a great way to kind of set up what you want to do. So I'm going to show a quick example of this in Blacklight. And one of the new features that we added inside of Blacklight with this release is the ability to add investigative notes. So you can see that here on the bottom left of my screen. And I just went ahead and wrote some intake notes here. So this is going to work similar to a notepad. These investigative notes are kept with your case, but they're not included in the report. This is more for you to just capture your thoughts, maybe copy and paste some different information as you go through doing your investigation to remind you where you were at. If you finish at the end of the day and you know the next lead that you want to follow up on is you want to check images for a specific thing, you want to say, I want to do that next. You can just leave these here so you have some notes for you. You can make as many of these as you like. They will not block the interface, so if you want to still interact with the interface, you can have this up and just kind of have a scratch sheet that then goes along with your case. So it's just a nice place to have your notes in preparation for what you're going to do. So we've got our plan, and now we're ready to get started. The next tip that I want to focus on is making sure that you know your tool. And this is going to help you both in knowing what your tool can do and knowing how long specific things take to run. Ideally, like in Blacklight, you can run certain options up front, start your investigation, and then run longer options further down the line. Some functions just take a long time because they have to touch every file. Things like hashing, if you're going to do that across your whole case, that's going to take a little while just because it needs to read all the bytes. There's not a, way to super speed that process up. Other processes, though, maybe you know that your tool does this faster or better than other tools, and knowing where you can get that information is really important. Another thing that you can look at is if you know that there's specific areas like the registry that you want to pull out first and you want to dive into quickly, you can set up templates for you to look for those areas right off the bat. If those are things that you always have to do as part of your investigation, you can go ahead and look at those pieces first. So the more you're able to customize your tool and know where those options are, the faster that can go. So when you're jumping into Blacklight, you need to be as wise as Indiana Jones and choose wisely what you're going to start with. So I know that over here on the injection options, there's something that says all, but likely all is not what you want to run when you're working a case that is time sensitive. All might work if you're going to process everything over the weekend and you have a backlog queue and you just want to jump in and work the case once it's done all of its processing. But if you're looking at a time sensitive type case, you're going to want to start with a subset of options, and you can always run any of these other options later. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how those two pieces work. So if we're in Blacklight, we could do that at the processing options. There's also some quick places that we could look at if we're interested in starting off in a specific part. So actionable intel, I know that the particular one that we looked at had some info about wanting to start in the registry. That might be one place that you want. If you're looking at a security incident, you might look at things like file downloads. Knowing where to go when you start is a great way to know what you'd like to do. But if you were interested in the registry, one of the items we have here, I have an evidence file that has both a Mac and a boot camped Windows volume on it, is I could look through, and if I know I always want to get some basic security information about a user, I could go ahead and say that this area of the registry is a significant area for me. So over here on the right, I have the option to say, whenever I do an investigation, I think the user's information in the registry under the SAM section, even though it might be pulled out in my main tool, is something I want to verify. And if I make it as significant, now I can come and look at all the different places in the registry that I think of as significant. And I can look through those automatically to pull out stuff like, let's go ahead and see what the last logged in date was, or when he last changed his password. So I could take this, and again, if I'm just trying to keep some notes for myself, I might go ahead and say, okay, well, I saw that the last logged in date was that. And then I just have it for a note. I'm not necessarily wanting to put that in my report, but now I have a note for that as someplace that I might want to come back to later is when I last saw activity on this machine. So first two steps are make a plan and know how to work your tool to do that plan. So do we have any questions, Julie, about those first two pieces?
Yes, so we have a few that came in. The first one, are the investigative notes saved with the case, and can anyone see them if I share the case file?
So the investigative notes are saved with the case. They're not part of the report, although you could take these and tag the data that you have in here if you wanted to copy and paste them in, but they are part of the case file. So if you shared the case file, they would get the notes that are there. It's not specific to a user.
Great. Can I save my favorite processing options is our next question.
Yes, you can save your processing options. So when we look inside of our evidence status here, you can see I've run some on certain files and not options on others. But as part of our case template, so up here we see file, save case template, you can actually choose both to save things like tags, file filters, or searches that you've done. But if you do edit ingestion options, this will let you pick what you want to have starting out the gate for the different items. So if you wanted to have a custom thing where you always ran picture analysis and you did known file identification and hashing, you could go ahead and set those as your default for ingestion options.
Thank you. And the last question in this section, are there any options I can't run later?
Pretty much all of the options you can run later. So you could choose to increment through any of these options. The one exception is some interesting behavior around APS and unallocated, because that's a special area of the drive. But in general, on most evidence types, any of these can be run later. So start with what you know is necessary and you know how it works and how to use it. And then if there's longer processes, you can usually run those later once you've kind of got a triage of the device that you're looking at. Are we ready to move to the next section?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. All right, so the next thing we want to do is narrow down what we're looking at. And traditionally, this has meant filtering, maybe some hash sets. We're going to show how those methods work. But this is trying to focus your attention not on the whole drive or the whole set of evidence, but really looking in on a specific area. So we're going to show just some basic saved filters. I'm not going to build all of these for us live, but we're going to show kind of how that works and how you can make sure you're using your hash sets to exclude anything you already know is on an operating system. It's surprising how much that actually impacts the amount that you're working with. And then we're also going to highlight in this section how you can now use the logical evidence file format to export files. So again, we want to limit how much we're working with and make sure it matches the scope of what we've been asked to do. All right, so coming back in to our view here, we're going to go up to the filter view because we want to work on some specific, looking for specific types of files. So I've actually saved a filter here that has a few different levels. And the first thing you're going to notice is that I've used my hash sets here. So if you guys are not aware, on in Blacklight, you can go to hash sets and it will actually allow you to download the known Windows and Mac hash sets. And both of those, I've actually run the known file hash sets against my case. So when I look at these PDFs here, I can see that I've chose to look for anything that is a PDF, not by extension, but anything after signature analysis that's been shown to be a PDF. I want to make sure it's not an empty PDF and that it's not an already known file. So I don't want to see things that are known files. So I'm saying all of these conditions are met. It's a PDF, it's not empty, and it's not part of the Windows or Mac operating system. So the first thing I could do with those, you can see there's 117 here. I could choose to select all of them and tag these items. So I could tag these files as PDFs that I need to review, which I actually already did before. You can see them showing up here on the PDFs to review as the items that I've selected. And I can also tell that they're already tagged because I can see the tagged item column here shows that these ones are tagged. So I could do that for PDFs to look at those. I could also say we have a lot of these common things here. So maybe you're looking at an image-based case, or you're working a case where you're looking more for documents. Here I've got Office documents, which are separate than PDFs. I could filter for those. And that would allow me to look at just the 39 documents that are not part of the known set. Again, I can highlight all of these and choose to choose to tag files and mark them as tagged. So I went ahead and did that, but I did want to show you the difference between when you're using these hash sets and not. So here I have 39 documents, Office files that are found that are not part of this set. But if I go ahead and remove these hash sets, you'll see that there's 57 of those ones. And if I were to do the same one that I did before with PDFs, I think that was the one where there was more of them. With the hash set removing items, there were 78, but without it, there's going to be 1,654. So a lot of these were actually PDFs that were installed as part of the operating system. Definitely 78 is a lot less that I have to review than 1,654. So if you're able to eliminate some of these broader areas, it'll really save you time on the system. And you guys can create additional hash sets beyond just the ones that we ship with, but those are ones updated for both the Mac and Windows system. Another thing that we can do is go ahead and combine items that we've tagged. So I'm going to make a new filter here. And we have this tag name. And I'm going to say I want to tag or anything that has the PDFs. Maybe I want to go ahead and work with both the PDF tags and the ones that were the Office files. And I want them to be, instead of in both, it's a PDF and an Office file. That likely isn't going to happen. I want to make sure that it's either in the PDFs tag or in the Office tag. So here I'm showing the group of those two together. I found all the Office documents and all the PDFs. Now, maybe that's all that they wanted to see. They might also want to add a date range to that or some other stuff. But if they just wanted all the docs and PDFs that are not part of the operating system, I can now choose to export those into a smaller set using our export selected files as a logical evidence file. You'll notice the extension here says LO1. These are actually the EnCase logical evidence file format, which is a forensic format that EnCase created originally, but many of the forensic tools support it. So this can be ingested by any of your forensic tools, including Blacklight, but it's also supported by tools that allow review, like Relativity or Recommind. Being able to bring these in, all of the metadata that we see here is preserved, and it's preserved in a single container file. So when we choose to export selected files, we've made it really simple in that we're just going to have documents for review. We're just going to ask you to go ahead and export it, and we're going to take the files that are in here and export them into a logical evidence file, preserving their folder path. So the other piece of logical evidence files is sometimes when you're looking at the difference between Mac and Windows, Mac and Windows have different limitations on how far down into the file system structure you can read. So by having it within a container, kind of like if you were to have it inside of a zip, you can actually have those structures preserved as they were originally on the disk. So if you export from the filtered view, even though you haven't chosen to export the whole folder structure, you can go ahead and still preserve it, because that's going to automatically preserve the folder structure when we export lefts. We're going to assume that you always want that. That would be the same as if we moved over onto the browser view and maybe you just wanted to export the users directory. You could go down to the users directory and again choose to export the following files as a logical evidence file, and then just bring those in as you would any other logical evidence file that you've worked with. Any questions on the logical evidence file stuff? Julie?
Yes, we have had a few questions come in. So the first one is, are the logical evidence files encrypted?
So by default, we do not, or actually in our implementation, we do not allow for encryption of logical evidence files. So you're not going to be able to do encryption within the file itself. You could always put it on an encrypted drive or put it within a container that you've encrypted.
And the next question we have is, what type of files can I export to logical evidence files? And does it support email?
So currently in this iteration, we only do files like you would see on the file system, not files extracted during parsing like emails within PSTs. Now Mac's a little different because EML and EMLX files sit on the file system as they are. You could export those because they're single files, but say you're looking for data that was parsed out of an index.dat file, that is not going to be exported currently in the logical evidence file. We would end up exporting the index.dat file or the whole PST at this point. So we do know that that's a request, and we'll be looking at that a little bit later down the road.
And the last one that came in about this section, which tools support importing logical evidence files?
So I mentioned a couple of the review tools, which are Relativity and Recommind, but I do know, of course, EnCase supports it. I believe Xways does, and some of the other forensic tools that you might have. The logical evidence file format reading, many of the tools do create. But this is our ability to actually create those as opposed to read them. So that is new for Blacklight for us to do the creation. And a note of clarification, since I saw a question, are we creating the LO1 or the LXO1? EnCase has done an update to their standard called LXO1. We're just doing the base support for the original logical evidence file, the LO1 format. That's why you don't see an option there, but to choose between LO1 and LXO1.
Great.
Any
Thanks.
other questions?
I think that's all for this section.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we've narrowed down our scope. We could bring in those logical evidence files. Maybe you just want to make a logical evidence file of all the graphics. That would be one way that you could filter down to what you're looking for. We might also look at filtering down by date specific files. So I'm going to show you quickly how to make a filter that will just look across all the different dates. But one of the techniques that is new is our new image categorization that is in Blacklight 2019 R1. So we have a whole webinar on Image Analyzer's integration into Blacklight. So please check that out if you want more details, but I want to go over some of the highlights of why we're so excited to have image categorization. So when we look at image cases, there's just so many images that are out there. And there's been some great techniques around hashing and even tools that help you identify known hashes of files that have exploitive material in them. But we want to be able to provide the capability to highlight items that might be categories that are risky on a device, whether it's for law enforcement looking for specific types of images or within corporate use cases, making sure they could look for, improper use of a device by looking at pictures they shouldn't be looking at work. We want to make sure that it's easy for us to find those pictures that are more likely to have that type of material. And we want to do that using a machine learning based technology. So it's looking for new things. It's actually analyzing the images across your case to see if there's any of this type of content. So I'm going to focus on this section on how we can do that type of investigation. So say you're told, hey, I want to also know if there's any pictures of weapons, of the subject holding weapons, or I want to see if there's, they're on probation and they're not allowed to be using drugs. I want to see if there's anything with drugs. That might be a law enforcement use case for this piece, but they might also be just corporate use of, I want to make sure people aren't looking at explicit material during work hours. Can you run a search? There's been a complaint that this particular person is doing that in an area where everybody can see them during work hours. So can you show me if there's any material in that area? So one of the things that we did actually improve beyond just our ability to add image analyzers, we've done some rework here just to make it a little simpler when we're reviewing pictures. Now pictures is our first tab, but you'll see that we have the ability to now sort and bring up to the top of your investigation specific risky categories. So if you are law enforcement and you want to see if there's any pictures of weapons, whether it's a shooting event that you want to see if there's information more on their system, or as I mentioned, maybe images of drugs, these are the categories that we currently have. I'll show you as well. I think I have them listed here. So you can see that we have all of these different categories available, as well as CSAM is coming soon. And you can select them from this dropdown. So I'm going to sort by weapons first. And then I could choose to either tag these items. There is always the way for you to tag, especially if you're reviewing specific type of images. Adding additional tags for each type of violation allows you then, once you're going to produce it across multiple by doing that filtering where you stack your tags. And then you could say, well, I want to see all that were category 1, 2, 3 of the different types of filters. So one of the tricks to doing selection of these a little more fast or a little more quickly is you can do the sticky select, which will let you select pictures without having to hold down any shifts. So that's available in the gallery view. But as you can see, these categories really do help you bring up those images. I didn't have to narrow down my case by date range or look in specific folders. These were able to bubble up to the top. So Image Analyzer is going to continue to improve their models. So you're going to get updates to our support for these categories, as well as adding new categories as we go along. But I think if you try running through these, you're going to be very happy with how well these identify different categories of threats. Some of them are a little more complex, so you're going to maybe get more accurate results for things like weapons, which are easier to identify, whereas extremism is a little more rare, and those might be more difficult. But that is one thing that we're hoping will help, especially for investigators who have to look at all of those images that they may not want to be looking at. You can always still filter out the items that were in the known hash set. This one, none of these are in the known hash set, but we can always choose here to apply a filter from our filters view. So if you had under your file filters view running that hash set, so anything in the known hash set would be eliminated from this view, you can go ahead and choose to run that on top of it. So that'll even reduce more the number of images that you need to check out. All right, Julie, any questions on that section?
Yes, we had a lot of great questions coming in about this feature. What are some new categories that will be coming?
So I mentioned the CSAM, the exploitive material piece is one that is going to be coming for the children's images. We've also had requests for documents of identification for items around currency. So those are some of the most popular requests that we get right now. And if you want to request additional categories, you can go to our product feedback form on our website and go ahead and request them there. And then we'll be working with Image Analyzer for them to develop models that help identify those images. Any of these models don't actually contain the actual files or images itself. It's used based on some algorithms, and so we're able to update those rather quickly.
Great. Does it cost extra?
So Image Analyzer and the image categorization is built into everyone who is current for Blacklight. So if you've downloaded 2019 R1, it is there, and you don't need to do anything else to make it work.
And does it run on carved files?
So it does run against after the carved files. You might need to process again after it, but you can, once it's carved out something that it's identified as an image, then it can run against those images. I did have a question about what happens if the image hits on multiple categories. So let me show you a second here. The metadata information will have it down on you can either do it here on the bottom left or in the metadata down below. So this one hit 100% on weapons. If one of the algorithms hits 100%, it's not going to do the rest of the algorithms against it because it says it's 100% that particular category. Now, if it's more varied, like 99.9, it would still run the other algorithms. So let me see if I can get any that have multiple here. Looks like most of these are pretty high. So you can see here that it also hit for possibly having drugs or extremism. You're going to see those items set up across the threat categories. Only if it thinks it's 100% match for something that's a weapon or something that's drugs, would it not run the other categories. Otherwise, you're going to see all of the categories assessed. And right now in the product, you do have to run all the categories. You can't choose to short circuit and only select specific ones. I think there was a question about setting up a date filter. So I also want to show how that can be done. I did create a date filter in mine, and then I will also show you how you can do this in the next section when we talk about searching. So if you wanted to set a filter for date range, this is going to look across any created, modified, accessed, or date added. So say I knew my investigation happened and my scope was only for the year 2017, or if you're looking for a networking event, you might actually have it even smaller to a specific day. But you can run this filter, which this one's going to return a lot more files. So if I were to narrow down this, I might create a logical evidence file of it, but it would, oh, well, I ran it on a small evidence set. So it only had dates in this particular range. I could choose to tag these and say, okay, these are just the files within this date range. And then I can add to that additional filtering if I want. I think that was part of the question. But once you have this built in, when you go to the media view, now you can choose to run that current file filter, and it's going to narrow down my pictures to things in that particular date range. So you can combine the filtering with the image categorization. You can do those things together. And then, excuse me, those were part of the saved searches that were saved when we did the save case template. So you could choose to save those as part of a template. All right. So I think we're going to move on to the next section so we don't run out of time. And we'll get to some other questions if we have them. So the next thing that we added in Blacklight 2019 R1 is the index querying. So there's kind of in forensics 3 general type of searching that happens. And each of them is really powerful for a specific use case. Understanding when to use each one is really what will save you a lot of time because searching is just an intensive process. And we want to make sure we don't miss any data and that we've done it correctly so that we can confidently say, this is the data that you were looking for, or yes or no, those names did or didn't exist. So we're going to focus on 2 of these types. One is sometimes called raw keywords or raw data searching. That is going to encompass anything where you're looking for directly in a stream without kind of trying to break it up with any patterns, specific words or characters in a specific order. It's not about looking for things that are chopped up by words. And then regular expressions are patterns. So email addresses, where you're going to have something.something at something.com, or you're going to have something similar to that. There are known regular expressions for those, for IP addresses, for social security numbers, where it's a pattern, and it can be a combination of numbers and letters and special characters. Those are all done through kind of more like the raw keyword searching, but a layer on top of that is called regular expressions. And then the last type of searching, which is new for Blacklight in this latest release, is index querying. So with index querying, we'll talk about the advantages and how that works in the next couple slides. So let's go over why raw keyword searching has been the preferred and most thorough option that we have available. Raw keyword searching is the type of searching you do against a drive where you want to look at every single character in a row and see if it matches what characters you're sending it. I want to find A, B, C, D, E all together in that order on the drive, regardless of if it's in an unallocated space or Slack space or part of the metadata. I want to find all of those characters as I've set it. And I don't care if there's a space after it or more letters after it. I just want to see those characters in a row. So you can search anywhere on the drive with keyword searching typically. There can be exceptions when you're looking inside of compound items where we've had to pull that information out, but you can look for things like patterns, and you can look for things in memory where it can be kind of more a lot of junk and then actual words and then a lot of junk. It's easier to identify looking for those specific values using keyword searching. I'm going to quickly show you how we do keyword searching in Blacklight and some ways to speed that up. But the only limitation on keyword searching is every time you want to look for something new, you're going to have to run that against the whole drive itself. So if you have 100 keywords that you run up front that you always run on a case, you put those into the keyword search and it will look everywhere for them. But then if you want to do 101, the next one, you're going to have to research the drive. It's still going to give you the most comprehensive results, but it is going to take a little bit more time once you add additional words to it. So within Blacklight, we have these two types of searches, and the content search is what we would do for keyword searching. So if I want to add a keyword search here, I can choose where I want to search. I could search across all my files. I could search against specific areas. I might want to search just the Windows and the volume shadow copy that I brought in from Windows. And I could even narrow it down by path. Maybe I only want to search the users directory. I could do that. I can also choose, do I want to search content or file names or only file names? I'm going to choose content here. I can choose things like case sensitivity. Deep search is helpful when you're looking at files like doc and docx. So doc files, the text is just on the drive, but docx, you have to look inside the container. And then another thing we could do is we made that date range search. Maybe we only want to search documents from 2017. We could use that one that I had just run, the date filter, and limit my keyword search to that area. Another thing that is helpful, especially if you're going to look across, say, the whole users directory, is maybe you know you don't want to look inside of executables or bin files. This is excluding them. So you wouldn't want to put anything in there that you do want to search, but then you could also search for whatever keywords you know about your case. So from our initial notes, we know that it was about a stolen Ford Mustang, so I could put in Mustang and Ford, and I could run this keyword search. So I could either save it so I had it going forward, or I could run it, and that would allow me to do a keyword search looking anywhere on the drive for it. So those are some ways to speed up regular keyword searching, because it's still a powerful technique. But today I want to also focus on index querying, since that is new for us. So this initial implementation of our index query is going to focus on the files that are on the drive. So when we think about an index, it's actually a two-part process. The first process is going to be processing all of the documents on the system to pull out what words are actually in those documents. So we're focusing on things that are more like words, like the word Josh or the word tree or the word Ford or the word Mustang. We're looking at words, not necessarily if they had letters and numbers mixed together. So if it's, kind of in the leet speak sort of specification, that's not considered by most index word breakers a word itself. Beyond words, you also get indexed the metadata. So you could look for things like device is iPhone 4. Those are additional types of searches that typically forensic index engines allow you to do. So you do spend some time up front building the index, pulling out all the words in the case, but then it's going to be very quick to run your different searches to look for different types of words. And then the other piece that's an advantage to an index is you can locate pretty easily, where it can be more complex to do that in keyword searching, words that are near each other in a specific order, and you can combine that with things like date ranges and paths. So there is an upfront cost to building the index, but once it's built, you're going to be able to more quickly follow the lead in your case to find the data that you're looking for. So again, over on the left, we now have our index searches. I've set up a couple of these for us to look at. And the first one that we could look at is going to be called Mustang. So I'm going to grab that one real quick. Give me a second. This is why you shouldn't do all of the things live. Do we have questions, Julie, while I send back this piece?
Yes, so a few questions have come in during this section. The first one, does indexing search Slack or unallocated?
Indexing does not currently search Slack or unallocated. We want to focus indexing on the areas that we think are going to be most relevant for you to look at. So again, keyword searching is going to be better for doing any sort of unallocated or Slack piece. But when we're looking at the actual data within the files, that is where your index is going to make the most value.
Got it. So is searching the index case sensitive?
Searching the index is not case sensitive, so I'm going to show you how we can search the index here. So I have my saved search here, and I have my terms, but you'll notice that Mustang has a capital M and Ford has a lowercase f. So if I run this query, I'm going to be able to see things that have the word Mustang or the word Ford, and I can highlight multiple of these files, and then I'm going to see them down in the hit context down below. So I can see here Ford and Mustang are both highlighted, and I can see that those words are in the files. So I can actually highlight multiple of the files. This is individual files that are responsive, and then I can go through the hits themselves down in this middle section with seeing previews of that particular area. So those are ways that you can look for files that have either the word Mustang or the word Ford. I did mention we can also look across more complex pieces. So the operators that we have are and, or not, and then you can group things together using the wraps. So if we were looking for our created date or modified date or access or changed, and we wanted to do it in a particular path and make sure the file size was larger than 1 and it had Mustang, we can actually combine all those pieces together and run it in one section. And then we can go ahead and, again, highlighting one will give you just that hit. If you highlight multiple files, you'll be able to search across those files for any of the hits. And the last piece that we can do is looking for things within a number of words of things. So if I want to look across Facebook or Josh, I can actually look for things within so many words of the other. So this allows me to say, okay, I want to find the word Josh within 5 words, each of these being considered a word, to look at them together. So there's a lot of different complexities to indexing. One of the things that we've provided is a cheat sheet for how the operators work. And that is also available for you in the release notes. There was a question about which index is used, whether it was DT search based or Lucene based. This is a Lucene based index. It is our own implementation of it, and you'll notice that any of the Lucene or Elastic searches query language, if you're familiar with either of those are going to be similar to what you're going to be using as far as our searching. Were there any other questions, Julie?
Yes, so how large are the index files and how long does it take?
So the index files are a lot smaller because we're not trying to index things that are not as valuable. So you're going to have index files that are significantly smaller than your case file or even your evidence file, because we're focusing on things like documents and not things like executables or memory files. As far as speed, that's always variable. I think if you try it, you'll be pleased with how quickly it does run, but indexing up front is going to take you a similar amount of time to, say, like a keyword search, maybe a little bit longer than that. And then once you do the queries, you can quickly go through queries of data without having to wait.
Great. And how about saving index searches? Can users save them?
Yeah, so every one that I've added here, I can go ahead and choose to create and save another one. So if these were ones that I'd actually had saved in the case. And then if I want to add a new one, I can go ahead and add a new one. And once I name it, it will be saved here. If you want to copy any ones that you already had from other cases, those will be available for you as well.
Great. And the last question from this section that we'll focus on, can I exclude files from being indexed?
So right now, we don't do any exclusion in the index options. So when you looked at the evidence status for indexing, it's pretty much off or on. You're going to be indexing the files on the file system. The only way to really accomplish that would be to filter down which files you wanted to index and make a logical evidence file of those and then bring those in. And that would allow you to just search those files themselves.
That's great. Thanks, Ashley.
All right. All right, so the next part that we can look at is, as a time-saving technique, is to make sure that you hand off data early that will help make you be able to narrow in your case, or also get other people started so that they can give you more details back. So this can be especially helpful in mobile cases, but it can also be helpful on a regular case when you get a request for something unreasonable, like I want to review all of the documents, text files, PDFs, etc., from 500 machines. If you can show them a report that says that's 10 million files, they might come back and say, okay, I don't want all of those, so let's go ahead and narrow down what I'm looking at. So there's a couple ways that we can do that. We can look at the actual information about the device to give them an overview of, hey, this is about how much data is listed for this particular device. We can also give them information, again, kind of pulling out that actionable intel. Here's the top context this person has been working with. If you're talking to Josh, you might also want to talk to Arlene or Evan because they do a lot of messages, or Graham Gibson seems like he messages him, calls him, emails him. Those kind of statistics really help you focus on which relationships you should be looking at first. So the other piece is sometimes just doing an early report. So our reporting is really simple, and we can go ahead and look at a report here that is going to be just on this phone that I have ingested here. So if the investigator just wants to know, who has this person been talking to, who have they been calling, are there any other people that are important for us to focus on, you can quickly, without having to do additional processing or anything else, bring in the phone and choose to just give them the basic information about the device by selecting the device, and then choose under case data that you only run a report on this selected evidence. In this case, if I want to do it just on Tanisha's phone, I can choose that one, and I'll unselect these. Go back to my report. And then I can choose to look at the voicemail and calls just for that particular person. So I'd be able to say, okay, here's kind of what's on the phone, here's an overview, and then here's the most recent voicemails, and then here are the most recent calls and how long and what their status is. So quickly choosing to export these and give that data over so that they can start working the case right away allows you to go back and focus on some of the more deeper work. All right. Another way is to just prioritize which device you're looking at first. So again, you may want to determine which machine is the hottest, which one is the one that you want to look at first. We talked about content ratios, but you might also want to look at a timeline of activities. Have they used which apps have they used most recently? So we could look at things like account usage, who's logged into specific machines. If I was looking for Josh's machine, is there a Josh account even on that machine or not? Also things like file downloads, we covered that earlier. Having a list of your favorite places to look at, depending on your case type, will really help. And you can always filter it down by a time range. So if you just want to look in a specific time range to just help narrow it down, you can do that using some of the built-in filtering and artifacts that are extracted. So we know that data sets are not going to be getting any smaller. So having a plan before you get started and beginning with the end in mind is one way for us to make sure that we use techniques that make it quicker for us to work through the devices that we have. Making sure you have a tool where you can bring in all the evidence, but also can extract out just the pieces that you want to look at is helpful. And then heavy use of filtering and tagging really help you narrow your focus. The better you know your tool and the more you set up some of those preferences, like we had the filters here, or having some of those date preferences built in, the categories built in, the more you know about your tool, the better you're going to be able to quickly move through your case. So spending the time to know how it works, know what things take more time, and then sharing that information with other investigators, whether they're on your own team and you say, hey, if we have this type of investigation, use this case template because it's going to help you get data faster, really helps us focus on which devices are important. So were there any other questions, Julie?
Yes, we've had a lot of great questions come in, so I'll focus on a few right now, and then we will respond to everyone individually after. I want to just be mindful of the top of the hour mark. So what report formats are available?
So we can see which ones are available right here. You can go out to HTML, PDF, DocX, text, CSV, all of those work to be able to export to.
Great. And when will all these features be available?
So all of these are available in Blacklight 2019 R1. So you guys should be able to use them right away once you download the new build. So if you go to our software downloads, they're available there. And all of these are also covered in a little bit of step-by-step in our blog post, as well as in the release notes. So I highly recommend, especially for the index, all of those pieces are covered in the release notes.
Excellent. Well, Ashley, thank you for walking us through all the latest features in Blacklight and showing us how examiners can find the most relevant information as quickly as possible. Again, if you submit a question and we didn't get a chance to answer it live, a member of our team will reach out and follow up with you individually. I've seen a few questions come in about the recording, and yes, we will be sending this out once it's available, so stay tuned. If you're interested in learning more, like Ashley said, we have a blog where we outline a lot of this as well as our products and services, but you can also email sales@blackbagtech.com. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and subscribe to our blog. Thanks again, Ashley, and thank you all for joining. Have a great day.